CDL Manual Section 2.7.1 Space Ahead. Safe drivers maintain space around their vehicles for the following reasons except A. In case you must stop suddenly. B. In case there are cars following too closely. C. In case there is an obstacle in the road. D. In case you need to test your brakes. CDL Manual Section 2.7.1 Space Ahead. How much space should you maintain in front of you at highway speeds? A. 7 seconds for a 60-foot vehicle. B. 5 seconds for a 60-foot vehicle. C. 10 seconds for a 60-foot vehicle. D. 3 seconds for a 60-foot vehicle. CDL Manual Section 2.7.1 Space Ahead. You are driving a 40-foot vehicle at 45 miles per hour. Driving conditions are ideal. Dry pavement, good visibility. What is the least amount of space that you should keep in front of your vehicle to be safe? A. 2 seconds. B. 3 seconds. C. 4 seconds. D. 5 seconds. CDL Manual Section 2.7.1 Space Ahead. Which of these statements about managing space is true? A. Smaller vehicles require more space to stop than larger ones. B. When the road is slippery, you should keep much more space in front of your vehicle. C. Many accidents are caused by drivers keeping too much space in front of their vehicles. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.7.2 Space Behind. If you find that you are being tailgated, you should A. Quickly change lanes to avoid an accident. B. Flash your brake lights to warn the tailgater. C. Decrease the distance between you and the tailgater. D. Increase the distance in front of you if possible. CDL Manual Section 2.7.2 Space Behind. If you are being tailgated, you should A. Signal the tailgater when it is safe to pass. B. Speed up. C. Flash your brake lights. D. Increase the space in front of you. CDL Manual Section 2.7.4 Space Overhead. Which of the following statements about overhead space is true? A. The heights posted at bridges are usually accurate. B. The weight of the cargo changes a truck's height. C. Warning lights are always installed on low bridges and overpasses. D. An empty van is lower than a loaded one. CDL Manual Section 2.7.6 Space for Turns. When making a left-hand turn, you should always A. Wait until you reach the center of the intersection before you turn. B. Start in the left-hand lane if there are 2 turning lanes. C. Pull into the intersection in case the light turns before you are through. D. Wait for a small gap in traffic and accelerate. CDL Manual Section 2.7.6 Space for turns. When making a right-hand turn, you should always A. Steer into the left lane first so you can make the corner. B. Rush through the intersection so you can get out of the way of traffic. C. Back up to make the driver behind you move back. D. Keep the rear of your vehicle close to the curb. CDL Manual Section 2.8 Seeing Hazards. The most important reason for being alert to hazards is so A. You will have time to plan your escape if the hazard becomes an emergency. B. Accident reports will be accurate. C. Law enforcement personnel can be called. D. You can help impaired drivers. CDL Manual Section 2.8.2 Hazardous Roads. While driving, you see a small, 1-foot square, cardboard box ahead in your lane. You should A. Steer around it when it is safe to do so. B. Hit it with your vehicle to knock it off the road. C. Brake hard to avoid hitting it. D. Stop and direct traffic around it. CDL Manual Section 2.8.3 Drivers who are hazards. A vehicle marked at the rear with a red triangle having an orange center A. Is hauling hazardous materials. B. Is moving slowly. C. Is a farm vehicle. D. May stop at any time. CDL Manual Section 2.11 Driving at Night. By law, you must have your vehicle's lights on A. 1/2 hour after sunset until 1/2 hour before sunrise. B. Unless street lights are lit. C. Only when there's not enough natural light to see clearly. D. None of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.11 Driving at Night. Driving at night is more dangerous because of the following, except A. Most people are less alert at night due to fatigue. B. Headlights often cause glare, which can blind drivers. C. Traffic lights are less visible than in the day. D. There are more drunk drivers at night. CDL Manual Section 2.11.2 Driver Factors. What is the best thing to do if you are tired? A. Drink plenty of coffee to stay awake. B. Take pills to keep you alert. C. Plan your trips for the middle of the night to avoid traffic. D. Get enough sleep. CDL Manual Section 2.11.4 Vehicle Factors. Which of these is a good rule to follow when driving at night? A. Keep your instrument lights bright. B. Look directly at oncoming headlights only briefly. C. Keep your speed slow enough that you can stop within the range of your headlights. D. Wear sunglasses. CDL Manual Section 2.11.5 Night Driving Procedures. High beams should be A. Dimmed when you are within 100 feet of another vehicle. B. Used whenever it is safe and legal to do so. C. Turned on when an oncoming driver does not dim his or her lights. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.13.1 Vehicle Checks. Which of these statements about cold weather driving is true? A. In snowstorms, wiper blades should be adjusted so that they do not make direct contact with the windshield. B. Exhaust system leaks are less dangerous in cold weather. C. There is no need to worry about engine overheating when the weather is very cold. D. Windshield washer antifreeze should be added to the washer reservoir. CDL Manual Section 2.13.1 Vehicle Checks. While driving, ice builds up on your wipers and they no longer clean the windshield. You should A. Keep driving and spray the windshield with washer fluid. B. Keep driving and reach out the window and knock the ice off. C. Pull over in a safe place and remove the ice. D. Keep driving and turn your defroster on. CDL Manual Section 2.13.2 Driving. Retarders A. Allow you to disconnect the steering axle brakes. B. Cannot be used on interstate highways. C. Work better at very low RPMs. D. Can cause the vehicle to skid when the road is slippery. CDL Manual Section 2.13.2 Driving. You should avoid driving through deep puddles or flowing water, but if you must, which of these steps can help keep your brakes working? A. Applying hard pressure on both the brake pedal and accelerator after coming out of the water. B. Gently pressing the brake pedal while driving through the water. C. Turning on your brake heaters. D. Driving through quickly. CDL Manual Section 2.13.2 Driving. When roads are slippery, you should A. Stop and test the traction while going up hills. B. Drive alongside other drivers. C. Decrease the distance that you look ahead of your vehicle. D. Make turns as gently as possible. CDL Manual Section 2.13.2 Driving. Your brakes can get wet when you drive through a heavy rain. What can this cause when the brakes are applied? A. Lack of braking power. B. Trailer jackknife. C. Wheel lockup. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.13.2 Driving. CDL Manual Section 3.2.4 Balance the weight. Which of these can cause the vehicle to skid? A. Not enough weight on the drive axles. B. Over acceleration. C. Turning too sharply. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.14.1 Driving in very hot weather. The following statements about an engine overheating are true except A. Antifreeze is only used in colder temperatures. B. If you can touch the radiator cap with your bare hand, it is probably cool enough to open. C. It is not possible to safely drive without radiator fluid. D. Never leave the engine running if it is overheating. CDL Manual Section 2.16.2. Select the right gear. If you try to downshift while coming down a mountain, you might A. Damage the engine. B. Wear out the clutch. C. Get stuck in neutral. D. Lose traction. CDL Manual Section 2.16.2. Select the right gear before starting down the grade. You are driving a new truck with a manual transmission. What gear will you probably have to use to take a long downhill grade? A. A lower gear that you would use to climb the hill. B. The same gear you would use to climb the hill. C. A higher gear that you would use to climb the hill. D. None. Newer trucks can coast down hills. CDL Manual Section 2.16.3. Brake fading or failure. You are traveling down a long, steep hill. Your brakes get so hot that they fail. What should you do? A. Pump the brake pedal. B. Downshift. C. Look for an escape ramp or escape route. D. All of the above, simultaneously if possible. CDL Manual Section 2.16.4. Proper braking technique. Truck escape ramps. A. Cannot be used by certain types of heavy vehicles. B. Are designed to protect vehicles from damage. C. Should not be used unless you have first tried all other ways to save your vehicle after brake failure. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.16.4. Proper braking technique. Which of these describes how you should use the brake pedal on a steep downhill grade? A. Release the brake when you are 5 miles per hour below your safe speed. Then let your speed come back up to your safe speed and repeat braking again. Bring your speed down 5 miles per hour below your safe speed. B. With stronger pressure as the vehicle goes downhill. C. Light, steady pressure all the way down the grade. D. Light pumping action. Gradually increase pressure if speed increases. CDL Manual Section 2.17.1. Steering to avoid a crash. What is countersteering? A. Using the steering axle brakes to prevent oversteering. B. Steering in the opposite direction from what other drivers expect you to do. C. Turning the wheel in the opposite direction after steering to avoid a traffic emergency. D. Turning the steering wheel counterclockwise. CDL Manual Section 2.17.1. Steering to avoid a crash. Your vehicle is in a traffic emergency and may collide with another vehicle if you do not take action. Which of these is a good rule to remember at such a time? A. Stopping is always the safest action in a traffic emergency. B. Open the door and jump out if you have time. C. Heavy vehicles can almost always turn more quickly than they can stop. D. Leaving the road is always more risky than hitting another vehicle. CDL Manual Section 2.17.1 Steering to avoid a crash. You are driving on a 2-lane road. An oncoming driver drifts into your lane and is headed straight for you. Which of these is generally the best action? A. Steer to the right. B. Steer onto the left shoulder. C. Hard braking. D. Steer into the oncoming lane. CDL Manual Section 2.17.1 Steering to avoid a crash. You are driving in the right lane of a 4-lane, undivided road. You come over a hill and find a car stopped ahead in your lane. You do not have room to stop, and the hill blocks your view to the rear. Which of these is most likely the best action to take? A. Steer to the right. B. Use hard braking and brace for collision. C. Steer into the left lane. D. Steer into the oncoming lanes. CDL Manual Section 2.17.1 Steering to avoid a crash. To avoid a crash, you had to drive onto the right shoulder. You are now driving at 40 miles per hour on the shoulder. How should you proceed? A. Keep moving at the present speed and steer very gently back onto the pavement. B. Steer sharply onto the pavement and countersteer when both back wheels of your vehicle are on the road. C. Brake hard to slow the vehicle. Then steer sharply onto the road. D. Come to a complete stop, if possible, before continuing back onto the road. CDL Manual Section 2.17.2 How to stop quickly and safely. Which of these is the most important thing to remember about emergency braking? A. If the wheels are skidding, you cannot control the vehicle. B. Disconnecting steering axle brakes will help keep your vehicle in a straight line during emergency braking. C. Never do it without downshifting first. D. It wears brake linings. CDL Manual Section 2.17.2 How to stop quickly and safely. Stab braking. A. Should never be used. B. Involves locking the wheels. C. Involves steady pressure on the brake pedal. D. Should only be used on slick roads. CDL Manual Section 2.17.3 Brake failure. Your vehicle is going down a long hill, and your brakes begin to fail. What should you do? A. Pump the brake pedal. B. Downshift. C. Put the gears in neutral. D. Look for an escape ramp or an escape route. CDL Manual Section 2.17.3 Brake Failure. You are testing the stopping action of service brakes on a hydraulic system. Which of these can mean there is a problem? A. The brake pedal goes to the floor. B. Stopping action is delayed. C. The vehicle pulls to one side when the brake pedal is pressed. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.17.4 Tire Failure. In the event of a tire failure, you should A. Stay off the brake and hold the steering wheel firmly. B. Pump the brakes until you come to a stop. C. Accelerate quickly until you find a place to pull over. D. Disengage the clutch so you are in neutral gear. CDL Manual Section 2.17.4 Tire Failure. Which of these is a sign of tire failure? A. Steering that feels heavy. B. Vibration. C. A loud bang. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.17.4 Tire Failure. The following are all probable signs of a tire blowout except A. A loud bang. B. Vibration of the vehicle. C. The smell of smoke. D. A thumping sound. CDL Manual Section 2.19 Skid Control and Recovery. The most common cause of serious vehicle skids is A. Driving too fast for road conditions. B. Poorly designed roads. C. Poorly adjusted brakes. D. Overinflated tires. CDL Manual Section 2.19.1 Drive Wheel Skids. To correct a drive wheel acceleration skid, you should A. Stop accelerating and push in the clutch. B. Downshift. C. Pump the brake. D. Accelerate quickly. CDL Manual Section 2.19.2 Correcting a drive, wheel braking skid. To correct a drive wheel braking skid, you should A. Pump the brake. B. Steer in the opposite direction. C. Release the brake and steer, countersteer. D. Accelerate quickly. CDL Manual Section 2.19.2 Correcting a drive wheel braking skid. To correct a rear wheel, drive wheel, braking skid, you should A. Apply more braking pressure to the brake pedal. B. Release brakes and accelerate. C. Apply more pressure to the brake pedal and steer countersteer. D. Release the brakes and steer countersteer. CDL Manual Section 2.19.3 Front Wheel Skids. A front wheel skid is usually caused by A. Driving too fast for conditions. B. Lack of tread on the front tires. C. Cargo improperly loaded. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.20 Accident Procedures. In the event of an accident, you should remember to do the following, except A. Move the victims out of the way immediately. B. Protect the area. C. Notify authorities. D. Stop any bleeding and keep the victims warm. CDL Manual Section 2.21.1 Causes of Fire. Which of the following are causes of vehicle fires? A. Spilled fuel. B. Short circuits. C. Driver smoking. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.22.1 Alcohol and driving. Which of these statements about drinking alcohol is true? A. Some people are not affected by drinking. B. A few beers have the same effect on driving as a few shots of whiskey. C. Coffee and fresh air can sober a person up. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.21.3 Firefighting. Water can be used to extinguish which of the following fires? A. Tires. B. Electrical fire. C. Gasoline fire. D. Chemical fire. CDL Manual Section 2.21.3 Firefighting. The best way to put out a fire is to A. Get as close as possible and spray the flames. B. Stand downwind and spray the flames. C. Stand upwind and spray the base of the fire. D. Stop spraying as soon as the flames disappear. CDL Manual Section 2.21.3 Firefighting. Which of these is a good rule to follow when using a fire extinguisher? A. Stay downwind of the fire. B. Keep it as close to the fire as possible. C. Aim at the base of the fire. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.21.3 Firefighting. The first step to take if your vehicle catches fire while driving is A. Head for the nearest service station. B. Get the vehicle off the road and stop in an open area. C. Park in the shade of a building. D. Immediately open the door and jump out. CDL Manual Section 2.22.1 Alcohol and Driving. Which of these statements about drugs is true? A. A driver can use any prescription drug while driving. B. Amphetamines, pep pills, or bennies can be used to help the driver stay alert. C. Use of drugs can lead to accidents and/or arrest. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 2.23.2 While you are driving. Which of these can help you stay alert while driving? A. Taking short breaks before you are drowsy. B. Keeping the cab warm. C. Taking over-the-counter cold medicine. D. Scheduling trips during hours that you are normally asleep. CDL Manual Section 2.23.3 When you do become sleepy. Which of these statements about staying alert to drive is true? A. If you must stop to take a nap, it should be at a truck stop or other public area, never on the side of the road. B. A half-hour break for coffee will do more to keep you alert than a half-hour nap. C. The only thing that can cure fatigue is sleep. D. There are drugs that can overcome being tired. CDL Manual Section 2.24.3 Lists of regulated products. You do not have a hazardous materials endorsement on your commercial driver's license. When can you drive a vehicle hauling hazardous materials? A. Never. B. Only when the shipment will not cross state lines. C. Only when the vehicle does not require placards. D. Only when a person who has the hazardous materials endorsement rides in the vehicle. CDL Manual Section 3.1 Inspecting Cargo. Added note. Some state CDL manuals say within 25 miles after beginning a trip, but if question is similar to this, you'll know the answer is all of the above. How often should you check your cargo? A. Within the first 50 miles after beginning a trip. B. Every 150 miles or every 3 hours. C. After every break you take during driving. D. All of the above. CDL Manual Section 3.1 Inspecting Cargo. Cargo inspections. A. Should be performed after every break you take while driving. B. Are only needed if hazardous materials are being hauled. C. Not the responsibility of the driver. D. Should be performed every 6 hours or 300 miles. CDL Manual Section 3.2.2 Legal Weight Limits. The legal size and weight distribution limits. A. Should be your guide. B. are not changed by adverse conditions. C. Does not ensure safe operations in adverse conditions. D. Are changed by the states depending upon the season. CDL Manual Section 3.2.2 Legal Weight Limits. Which of these statements about cargo loading is true? A. State laws dictate legal weight limits. B. Slight overloading of a vehicle can make its brakes work better. C. If the shipper loads cargo, the driver is not responsible for overloading. D. The legal maximum weight allowed by a state can be considered safe for all driving conditions. CDL Manual Section 3.2.2 Legal Weight Limits. State laws can regulate A. The weight of your vehicle, but not the cargo. B. The weight of the cargo, but not your vehicle. C. Both your vehicle and cargo weights. D. Neither weights. The federal government regulates legal weights. CDL Manual Section 3.2.4 Balance the weight. A vehicle is loaded with very little weight on the drive axle. What may result? A. Damage to drive axle tires. B. A need to disconnect the steering axle brakes. C. Better handling. D. Poor traction. CDL Manual Section 3.2.4 Balance the weight. Underloaded front axles can cause the following. A. Steering wheel axle weight too light to steer safely. B. Poor traction. C. Damage to the steering axle and tires. D. Both A and B. CDL Manual Section 3.3.1 Blocking and Bracing. Blocking used to prevent cargo movement. A. Is secured to the cargo compartment floor. B. Is secured to the cargo itself. C. Is secured to the cargo and to the walls. D. Must be placed every 3 feet. CDL Manual Section 4.1 Vehicle Inspection. When should the pre-trip inspection report from the last driver be reviewed? A. During your pre-trip inspection. B. Doesn't have to be reviewed. C. Once per week. D. Once a month. CDL Manual Section 3.2.2 Legal Weight Limits. Overloading your trailer can result in the following, except A. It can slow you down on upgrades. B. It can increase stopping distances. C. It can help you go through snow better. D. It can increase speed on downgrades. CDL Manual Section 3.2.2 Legal Weight Limits. Bridge Laws. A. Control traffic on a bridge. B. Determine the maximum legal axle weight. C. Apply only to bridges in California. D. Can lower the maximum axle weight limit. CDL Manual Section 3.4 Cargo needing special attention. Which of these statements about certain types of cargo is true? A. Oversized loads can be hauled without special permits during times when the roads are not busy. B. When liquids are hauled, the tank should always be loaded totally full. C. Unstable loads, such as hanging meat or livestock, require extra caution on curves. D. Loads that consist of liquids in bulk do not present vehicle handling problems because they are usually very heavy. CDL Manual Section 3.4.1 Dry Bulk. Dry bulk tanks require special care because A. The load can shift. B. They have a high center of gravity. C. Both of the above. D. None of the above.